This is the House of Andrea. I'm Andrea Lee Matthews, an artist, photographer, and clairvoyant medium. And in this podcast, we explore what it really means to thrive as a soul having a human experience. How to connect with our energy, transcend those edges and boundaries that we create for ourselves, and open to the full spectrum of who we are. If you're ready to see yourself differently, to sense more deeply, and to expand into more of who you are, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, welcome back. I'm Andrea Lee Matthews. I thought this week we would dive into the topic of imagination, particularly how it connects across to our energy, our soul, our essence. Because I've always been a firm believer that our imagination is heavily linked to our clairvoyant senses, our intuitive senses, our ability to sense, interpret, receive, see, and unpack information that sits in the field. And I think it's really interesting because when we're children, we often have unbridled imaginations. We're very good at taking ourselves outside of the physical body, outside of the physical form, and imagining worlds and places and stories and characters. And then, as we know, as the common narrative is, as we get older and we develop and we learn ways to become more socially accepted, more fitting of the rules and standards within school, within family constructs and societal constructs as a whole, that ability of imagination can be left behind with some of the other considered childlike behaviors. And so our imagination gets almost pigeonholed or funneled and only allowed in certain constructs. We have this awakened ability to be able to imagine, to be able to create worlds, receive information, play with ideas, and move within that space when we're a child. But it's often a conscious decision, a very human, adult, conscious decision that has to be made when we're older to reawaken that imagination. But here is the really interesting thing that I believe as part of the work that I do and within my broader spiritual beliefs and my understanding of energy is that our imagination is simply an expression of our clairvoyant ability. And this can be a really interesting thing to wrap our minds around, particularly if we're still in a space where the idea of intuition or the idea of having senses and abilities outside those of the accepted, say, touch, taste, intuitive gut knowing, this concept of having extrasensory senses, these senses that can perceive energies beyond these standard acceptable senses, it can push us into uncomfortable places, right? I do believe that every human on this planet has these senses. These are just a normal part of being a living human being, but decisions get made along the way as to what's acceptable to use and what isn't. And so we make these micro decisions sometimes, these unconscious decisions, particularly if they come from ancestral lines of conditioning or patterned conditioning behavior from our upbringing, or even past lives, honestly, which we can get into a little bit later. These conditionings send a signal to our brain to tell us whether this is an acceptable thing, pattern, belief, ability to have, or it's not. And if there's any sense of danger or any patterning there that's considered a dangerous thing, perhaps based on prosecution in past lives, on using our abilities that led to isolation or punishment or even death, there could be an unconscious energy there that's closed it down. Or we're told as a child, like, come down from the clouds, get back into reality, stop daydreaming. those types of things, or we grow up very quickly. Maybe we've had an upbringing where we were forced to grow up very quickly and take on adult responsibility and face the real world and get into the normal modes and routines of society to be able to exist and live and flourish within that context. These little micro decisions, or these little micro exposures to things that could feel unacceptable or scary, cause us to turn off these senses that are just so innately part of us, because being a form of energy in the form of a soul in a human body, having a human experience at this time, because we are made of energy, it only makes sense that we can perceive energy, that we can feel, sense, know, be able to work with energy outside of ourselves, because we are a construction and organization of energy into a human form. So it makes sense in the bigger scheme of the universe and the bigger plan of everything that exists. It makes sense for things of energy to be able to, particularly if they've got consciousness, particularly if they are in the unique position that we are as humans, it makes sense that we would be able to interact with the energy. But these societal constructs and decisions and wanting to just exist in the simplest, easiest format, without resistance, without judgment, without isolation or rejection, it makes sense to shut down the parts of ourselves that perhaps could lead to those things. And so decisions can be made very, very early on in our childhood, that having an imagination that is beyond the realm of play, childlike play, isn't safe. And so our abilities such as clairvoyance, which is to see things that exist in energetic form through our third eye, we decide that that's not safe and we turn it off. But because it is something that is innate within us, we can make that powerful choice to allow ourselves to open, to see what life and what being a soul in this human body in this time could look like or feel like, what the experience could be having this sense open. And I really do believe that sometimes just making powerful decisions like this can change everything. Often we feel like it has to be some sort of convoluted or signatory coming of age moment or experience that opens things. But I really do believe the opposite of this. I believe that we can fundamentally activate, open, change so many things about ourselves through the power of decision, through the power of simple, intentional, powerful decisions. To have those line in the sand moments where we decide that we are in a space now where we want to start softening, opening, expanding into more of who we are, into more of what is here to experience, to work with, to see, to sense, to know. It starts with making this powerful decision. And so if you're listening to this and you have been remembering the imagination that you had, or you've been starting to feel like there is more that your imagination type mechanism, that feeling within your mind, your third eye, your energy, where you're like, I know, where you know there is more here that you can see that's beyond the physical matter. If you're starting to have these thoughts, these memories, these feelings, this is your soul saying to you, now is the time to start making this micro decision, this powerful micro decision with intention behind it, to open your clairvoyance ability. Now, sometimes when we hear words like clairvoyance, we can feel intimidated. We can contract. We can worry about what it means, particularly if we don't understand it. But clairvoyance really is just a form of imagination, but instead of it feeling like, oh, this is a mind thing, this is a logical front of the brain type, just creating things for the fun of it type feeling, it is a seeing beyond. It's like I can see what's here in front of me in the physical reality. There's objects, there's people, might be animals, there is physical matter in front of me. But when your third eye opens and your clairvoyant ability opens, it's like you're seeing into things. It's like more information, more color, more depth. And we're not talking about physical sight here. I'm talking about the same feelings, colors, mechanism that you use for your imagination when you're daydreaming, where you've got your eyes closed and you're meditating. Any of those states that you're in when your imagination is online, it's like having that. But instead of being in the mindset around, I'm going to create this, I'm going to imagine this fantastical thing that I know is not real, you're using the same mechanism, but you're getting this feeling, this knowing, this trusting of like, I am seeing something that is in an energetic format. It might be from the past, it might be from the future, it might be from the now, it might be an alternative pathway, but this ability, this imagination that I'm so practiced with and so familiar with, instead of it feeling like I'm writing a story in that childlike wonder, it's like I'm seeing a glimpse into something else, something in energetic format. And it can be hard to get your head around at first. Like I said, it can be difficult because you're like, what is going on? Am I just making this up? And it can throw up a lot of human mind-based questions of like, what is this? Because we are so used to firmly keeping imagination and play and ideation and daydreaming in a safe bucket. It's like we put it in this pocket of this is acceptable amount of daydreaming and imagination. But as soon as it starts to creep into being more than that, it's like danger zone, danger zone. I don't understand it. I can't comprehend it. I think I'm being a charlatan, or I'm making this up. I'm going crazy. All of these different dialogues can start to seep in and creep in, which dissuades us from following that energetic expression that's just happening through this clairvoyant ability. And there is, of course, this tendency to lean towards not wanting to do something unless it's proven, unless it's scientific, unless it's certain. And this was the old paradigm for such a long time. We needed the science there or the certainty to be able to really own this ability that we all have, to be able to trust it and to be able to express to others and say, oh yes, of course, this is something that I have and this is something that I do. We didn't do that in fear of judgment, because at the time, the science, the understanding and the normality of it just wasn't there. But we're not in that time anymore. The science, the quantum physics, the quantum metaphysics, all of that stuff is starting to catch up to give language, to give context and understanding to something that has always existed. We're in that time now in human evolution where the thing that we've been craving for, that science, that certainty, that knowing, it's starting to evolve now. But here's the thing, we don't need certainty to know something is true about ourselves. And I think this is the most important thing about spirituality, about spiritual development, and going on this journey of really unpacking who you are and tapping into more that exists around you, is that the thing that is the most powerful, the thing that matters the most above everything else, is what you believe, what you feel, and starting to work on the trust of that. Starting to come home to yourself and really sense, what is here for me? What is it that is actually beyond just my physical senses, just my physical experience and the cognition and the thinking and the structures that I have for myself and for my life? What am I starting to realize exists for me way beyond what I thought had existed in the past? That is where it all starts, asking that single powerful question. Because when you do ask the question and you give yourself permission to dive into that, everything starts to change. This is where spiritual awakening, spiritual transformation, the opening and expansion of who you are starts to begin, because you're finally coming back to that soul, knowing that there is more here for you and that you can do, pick up on, and work with than what you ever thought was possible. It's that glimpse back into when you were a child, some of those things that you could do, that you could sense, that you did know, that were there before the conditioning started to change it. And when you give yourself permission to ask that question and you start diving into it, it is amazing how fast the answers start to come. The trick, obviously, the thing that slows us down most of the time is questioning and not believing those answers that come. And coming back to what I was talking about clairvoyance and imagination, is that often, because we do live in quite a visual world, it can be one of the ones that is the most easiest to start trusting and to start accessing, to step our way down the pathway of really having all of our senses online and being able to start to sense and see and work with energy way beyond just what is contained within our physical form and even our soul and our field level. It is the gateway that connects us to everything else that exists. And it can be really exciting when we start to tap into this conversation, into this contemplation, and moving outside what we thought was possible. It is exciting when, even if there is a little trepidation there, it is exciting to kind of tap into that. Whoa, what is here? What could I pick up on if I allowed myself to really open and expand and believe what is possible? And I think this is the key. This is the sentence and the question that is the most powerful. It is like the one that you want to catalyze and ride to the moon, because when we are in a question like, wow, what is here? That level of excitement, that's when we start to soften. That's when we start to rapidly open, because there's excitement there. Writing a question with excitement, with possibility, with awe, with that childlike, oh my gosh, I just cannot wait to see what is here type energy is so much lighter and so much faster. It makes us move further in terms of our expansion and our receptibility than that feeling of, well, I don't know what's here. Oh, but it's scary. Oh, I don't think I can do that. You know, the density and the frequency of asking a different context rather than, you know, what is here? Can you show me? Versus, oh my God, what is here? I cannot wait to be shown what is here. The frequency is different. And kids, they tend to go to the positive, excited question. That is in their nature to go there before they're taught how to analyze, how to be sensible, how to look for evidence and proof and certainty to play it safe, right? So giving yourself permission to ask this question, allow yourself to expand and wonder, and start actively choosing to allow your imagination, if you want to use the framing imagination, but to allow your senses to open, to be shown, to see, to play, means that you're going to start tapping into energies in a visual-based form that you can build a repertoire around and a trust around and a belief around to really start stepping into more than exists around you. Now, clairvoyance, as I've explained, the mechanism is the same as what we use in our imagination, but it can be the gateway into so many different things. You know, some of the things that you might have heard about it in the mainstream is around clairvoyance is visions of the future. You know, it's probably the thing that most people think of when we think of clairvoyance. It's like, oh, that person or that clairvoyant can see the future. And yeah, that is one of the abilities of clairvoyance, but it is like such a small part of it. Clairvoyance is about seeing into the energy field. It's one of my strongest senses, which is why I can talk about this topic with conviction. But clairvoyance can be more than just seeing glimpses of future energetic timelines of a person, which is essentially what psychic sight is. Psychic foresight is seeing a potential of a future trajectory of a soul, seeing a glimpse of that based on a trajectory that that person is on alternate trajectories if they were to change certain things. That's essentially what psychic foresight is. But clairvoyance is also about seeing what exists in energetic form through visualization. It might be through color. You might have heard of people that can see auric fields. That's like colored energy fields around objects or around people. It's seeing visually into a field of energy. And that might be future projection, that might be auric, or it could be seeing. If you've ever been to a psychic reader and you sit down with them and then out of nowhere they can say, well, when you were 3 years old, this person, this thing happened and you did this or you felt this. And that person has never met you before, but they've just nailed an experience that you've had in the past. That is seeing energetic fragments from your current timeline back into the past. And it can go all the way back into ancestral stuff, past life stuff. This is a lot of the work that I've done in the past, both forwards and backwards. But clairvoyance can also be used in the present timeline too. You know, quite often when I walk into spaces, I can see how energy moves, how remnants of people who've passed through the space are still hanging in the area, where densities of energies are pooling or sitting, or any energy fragments that are still sitting in the energetic field of the building or the objects in the building. There is a lot that can go on in the energetic field. And when you open your clairvoyance or your sense of energetic sight, you can see energetic things that exist in the present moment, in flows, in people, in situations, in conversations, everything being made of energy, emotion, word, behavior, action, material, object, all of it being made of energy. When you're fully tapped into this ability, you can see things that exist in the field through these awakened, trusted senses. Now, this might be blowing your mind, and I understand that because I remember when I first started on this journey, it blew my mind too. It seems so unbelievable that we can be afraid of it. We can not want to go into that realm or into that space because we just don't want to get put into the bucket of being one of those cuckoo, cuckoo people that talk about things that don't really exist, right? We want to go back into the historical, just show me what is real and what is factual type mindset. But I can tell you with certainty, with trust, and being someone who's grounded and here and present and contemporary and not off in the clouds, this stuff is real. This stuff exists, and it's so often either in working with clients or doing my creative direction work in spaces with events and experiences in the tangible world, or even in my photography, being able to be open to sense and interpret what exists beyond the frame, beyond the physical, it's real. And the more that you step into that world and you trust it and you share it and you say, oh, hey, I'm sensing this, and this happened here, or I saw this, and this. And you get validation of like, oh my gosh, yes, that did happen. Or yes, that is the history of this place, without having ever stepped foot into that conversation or into that space before. In those early days when we need that validation, that can change everything, and that really helps. But as someone now who can just see it and trusts it, it is so possible to get to this point where this is real, where your abilities are open and you're in this space of trust, and things start to change when we're working with energy. Things in our lives manifest faster. Things that are no longer aligned for us start to vibrate out and move out. And we end up often through challenges or often through difficult situations, we're put through these beautiful soul-changing, soul-awakening and life-altering shifts that bring us closer to being back home with ourselves, where these abilities are just second nature. They are part of us. They are open and expanded and receiving. These moments of trust, of trying, of opening, of expanding, of seeing, open and expand us more and more and more. And then we go through that contraction or that difficult time or that dark night of the soul transformation to then spring back open even more, receive even more. It completely changes our lives. And when we bring these senses, the ability to see, clairvoyance, to be able to see more than what exists just here in front of us, when we bring that into our life's work, into our purpose, into our reason of being here, even into our beautiful relationships and the way we relate and connect with others, we start to connect with life on a totally different level. We start to see that there is more here than just the four walls that we look at day in, day out, or the views or the routines or the similar experiences that we have. We realize there is more here that exists. And when we realize there's more here, we realize that there's more that we can expand into, that we can tap into, that we can work with and create. And suddenly that feeling of just being in a life, in a routine, or, worst case, that mundane, trapped feeling of being who we are, but feeling like there's more that we're meant to be, we can start to see and work with and expand into more possibility. And all of a sudden, you can just feel the energy, that density, that heaviness shift out of your body. And you're like, I feel like I can take a breath. I feel like those things, those glimpses, those moments that I'm being shown, that pathway that I'm meant to walk down, I'm starting to see it reveal itself, even if it's just one tiny little moment at a time. And I've been talking about this, some channeled messages in the channel, which you haven't got in there yet. I highly welcome you in, invite you in to come and join us in that space. But there's been a few channeled messages that have dropped in over the last few days, which are really about this. It's about trusting, letting the path unfold, tapping into more and more of who we are, and letting go of the needing to know how, expanding into the possibility of what's coming, so that that pathway can unfold for us and we can walk down it into the highest version of ourselves, into the best version of ourselves, the best version of our lives, which is here for us to really anchor into and live. Because opening up our abilities, being able to see through our imagination, being able to visualize and see everything that is here, that is so that we can live the full experience of being a human. You've probably heard me mention this a few times, and even other people in this space will say, we're here to live the full human experience. But so often we define the full human experience by the tangible, by the physical, being in love with our body, having good relationships, doing work that we love, living in the house, having a good, clear mindset. That is a very tangible, physical definition of the human experience. But I believe that the human experience is that plus being tapped in, plus being awake, plus being awakened and plugged in and working and experiencing and sensing more than just the traditional definition of the human experience. I believe the human experience is about experiencing all of it. And that does include the polarity of the good and the hard. It is some of the hardest, most deeply difficult experiences in my life that have actually catalyzed the highest receptibility of my abilities. I look back and I think without some of the traumas and without some of the fires that I've walked through and that I've led myself through, I don't know that my abilities and my senses would have opened, because I would have stayed stuck in some of that humanness, some of that old conditioning and old patterning that would have left like a crust or a film, a wall around my abilities. And it's not until you have to lead yourself through the depths of transformation, of guilt, of shame, of fear, all of the stuff that we bring through from past lifetimes, from our childhood, that we inherit from our ancestral lives, walking and leading ourselves through some of us are the things that take down the walls, that take off the barriers, the Faraday cages to our beautiful senses and show us what we are capable of leading ourselves through. Number one, how resilient, how brave, how willing we are to keep walking ourselves forward. But two, it starts to show who we really are, what our energy signature is, what our frequency is. And by starting to identify that, that's when we can recognize our own frequency signature and allow it to expand out, to spread out and connect with and receive and match other frequencies that exist out there. And then using our senses, using our abilities, which we trust and we have switched on, to then unpack them, understand them, use clairvoyance to see, use a visual reference like imagination to interpret what we sense. We're using our clairaudience, which is hearing and words and sounds, using the energetic clairaudience sense to interpret what's here, or our knowing, or our feeling, or our emotion. Using these different abilities to interpret what's there. It takes walking ourselves through these things and clearing out all of the old stuff that is preventing that, to then fully step in, to then dive in deep. And when you give yourself permission to do this, to walk yourself through and then continue to open, that's when everything starts to change. And of course, we do still have difficult days. There are days where you will get in your head and you will question whether what you're sensing is real. There'll be a whole barrage of old conditioning and things that your mind wants to say and do to tell you that you're wrong, to second guess it. But it gets easier the more we build trust with ourselves. We keep saying, no matter what, I'm going to trust, I'm going to follow, I'm going to receive, I'm going to soften. The more that we do that, the more that our trust begins to grow, and then our abilities begin to grow. And one of the things that I always say to my clients and has been dropping into the channel lately is that if you ask for a sign, trust the sign that you're given. Quite often we ask to be shown something, like show me a symbol of a flower, or show me a symbol of a butterfly, or, give me this vision or this piece of information that I feel like is going to unlock the next thing. And then we get the vision, or we get the symbol, the sign, and then we go, oh, was that it? Or was I just looking for that now? Is that real? And I always say, I was having a conversation with one of my really good friends recently, and she's like, I asked for a sign and then I got the sign. She's like, but now I'm not sure if that was the sign. And I just sent back to her in capital letters. I'm like, trust the sign. We always get the answer we ask for. And so when we get into this beautiful expansion period of like asking, opening, using our senses, getting information, but then trusting it, this is where we build up our trust within ourselves that this is real. But it starts to become normal, and then it opens and expands faster and broader and bigger to be able to use these beautiful energetic gifts, because it's simply just energy, which we are recognizing energy, matching energy. We're simply tuning in and tapping into, opening up the channel to then receive that in. Our imagination, or our clairvoyance, or our visioning, visualization, whatever language you want to put around it, we are simply saying, please show me this. We're setting a frequency of receiving. We're opening up our visionary ability, our imagination ability, to allow the energy to find that and match it and show it to us in that visual format. That's all that's happening. It's a frequency match that's happening in the terms of a visual signal through the form of our imagination. And so if we get our mind in there and like, well, I asked for the symbol of this, or I asked to be shown this, and then I got shown this, or I got shown something completely different, what does that mean? Is that real? We pop the static of the mind over the top of it. We've just broken the frequency match. We've broken it through doubt, or through fear, or through that human mind questioning. And then it becomes impossible to continue to trust it. So if you know from your childhood, or even now, you have a strong visualization ability, a strong imagination, or you just want to make the powerful choice to open up this ability, do it. I highly encourage you, make that powerful decision now to say to yourself, I am going to open myself to become a beautiful, site-based frequency match for energy around me. Just make this decision, make this micro decision, and allow any doubt that comes up to just be held in this beautiful, loving energy of like, we're just going to play. We're just going to see what comes through. I'm just going to go through a period of trusting what this could mean for me, and just play like you're a child, that excited shooting to the moon on a rocket energy of like, I wonder what is here. I wonder if I make this decision to start seeing beyond just the physical and the material. What could I see? See what happens. That is where it starts. And if you're at a level where you're already using your visioning or your clairvoyance at a fairly solid level, but you're ready to go on that next level, define what that means for you. Set that intention. Start seeing if you can use your visioning, your imagination, your ability of energetic sight in a different way, and continue like you would with any other trust exercise of just continuing to trust, continuing to expand out. And this is why I love this clairvoyant creative direction work that I'm doing now, because I get to walk into spaces and see not just the beautiful physical art directed design of a space. Say it's a catwalk, say it's a fashion show, say
it's an exhibition or a storefront or whatever the space is with this beautiful idea of art, of expression, of mission is being expressed into space, I get to walk in and see what exists beyond the physical and material, beyond the setup, beyond the people in the space. I get to work with the visionaries of these women to see them and their field in their highest sense. And also all of the energy that wraps around to the guests, to the space, to the staff, to them, the whole lot, and use my incredible abilities to see, to sense, to know, to hear all of the energies in this space. And this is what's possible when you start to tap in and trust your own abilities. Because there is so much more, as I keep saying, there's so much more that exists beyond the physical and the material for us to tap into. The first step is trusting that we have the ability to awaken these parts of ourselves. And then once we build that trust and build those mechanisms, we can apply that to anything in this world that we want to do. For me, that's clairvoyant creative direction, working in these beautiful art meets vision meets expression spaces. But for you, that could be something else. It could be working with the earth. It could be working with people. It could be working with the land. It could be working with animals. It doesn't matter, because these gifts are not confined to certain industries. It's not just a coaching tool. It's not just a psychic medium reader tool. It's way beyond that. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about talking about this every week here on this podcast and in my work, is that you are so much more than what you've even felt to this point. And if you can start to just think back to that imagination ability as the first step, if you don't have any other senses that you want to tap into, just start with this, because imagination is something that we've already all done. It was there for all of us as children, whether we were vocal about it or not. As children, we all had this ability. And so it is like the easiest entryway into this work. And you can start by just being in a space and allowing yourself, like you would as a child, imagining, just be like, okay, I'm just going to soften for a moment. I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to see what I can see. And I'm going to trust myself enough to just spend a couple of minutes in this space every day, every week, however long. There's no prescription. Just feel into your body and see what makes sense to you. But I'm just going to start expanding, because this is where it begins. And we're going to get into some incredible topics and work in this space. But this is where it begins. And of course, at any time, if any of these topics start to awaken these parts of you that I'm like, I want to get on the rocket and I want to go now. And I know that that's in close proximity through this clairvoyant creative direction work with me, reach out anytime, send me an email, reach out, because sometimes walking shoulder to shoulder with someone who gets this and who's done this and just is in full belief, but not just full belief, but like full application on a day-to-day basis of this, can just shift your trajectory in your belief of yourself so much faster. But either way, we are going to be diving into some incredible stuff here on the podcast. This is just the beginning. I love you, and I will see you in the very next episode.
If you're not in there yet and you want to get into the private Telegram space where all of these audios drop every day, as well as all the art, the conversation, and the behind the scenes, go to www.andrealeematthews.com/private podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at Andrea Lee Matthews, and you can find more about me and all of my work at andrealeematthews.com. I'll see you in the next transmission.